When you look at a map, cities seem to have these neat, clean borders. But what happens when a city just refuses to stay inside the lines? When it just keeps growing and growing, spilling its people, its traffic, and yet its problems right into the town next door? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into today using the incredible case of Hidalgo, Mexico. I mean, just think about it for a second. A traffic jam that starts in your town but ends up paralyzing the next three. Pollution from a factory that doesn't care about a line on a map. And suddenly, public services like water and buses are completely strained by thousands of new people who technically live and pay their taxes somewhere else. It gets messy, and it gets messy fast. And this isn't just some what-if scenario. In the state of Hidalgo, which is right next door to one of the biggest cities on the planet, Mexico City, this isn't a trickle, it's a flood. This massive, sprawling growth is literally reshaping the entire region right before our eyes. So to really get what's going on in Hidalgo, you have to look south. You have to look at the giant metropolis casting this incredibly long shadow, Mexico City. Its explosive growth is the engine driving everything we're about to talk about. Okay, so there's a fancy word for this, metropolization. And the best way to picture it is like a drop of ink on a piece of paper. That drop is the main city. As it grows, the ink just bleeds outward, soaking into everything around it, blurring all the lines, until you can't even tell where one thing ends and the next begins. And this didn't happen overnight. It's been building for decades. It really kicked off back in the 80s when Mexico City's population started spilling over into neighboring states like Hidalgo. By 1990, Hidalgo's own capital city, Pachuca, was officially a metropolitan zone. 10 years later, 2 more cities got the same label. And today, get this, a staggering 29 different towns in southern Hidalgo are all caught up in this massive urban web. Now, when you hear about this kind of chaotic, sprawling growth, it's easy to just see the negatives. But the truth on the ground is way more complicated because this expansion brought a whole lot of problems and some really surprising progress. So first, the problems. And they're pretty much exactly what you'd expect. Shared bus routes become a total nightmare. Public services are stretched to the absolute breaking point. Local mayors are left scratching their heads, wondering whose job it is to fix a problem that crosses 3 different town lines. It all leads to this feeling of uncontrolled, disorganized growth, where it feels like nobody is really in charge. But here is where the story gets really interesting. Because if you look past all that chaos on the surface, and you actually dig into the data, you find something that you would never, ever expect. Something that completely flips the script on whether this kind of growth is only a bad thing. And the data here is just, wow, it's striking. Researchers looked at a well-being index, which is just a way of measuring things like decent housing, access to clean water, and education. Back in 1950, way before this boom, the average score in these towns was very low. But by the year 2000, it had shot up to medium high. So somehow, all of this messy, uncontrolled growth was directly linked to a massive improvement in people's actual quality of life. In this number right here, this says it all. Let's just zoom in on one small town, Tlatelolco. In 1950, its well-being was rated a 1, which is extremely low. Just imagine what life was like for families there. But by 2000, it had skyrocketed to a 7, or high. That's a 6-level jump on an 8-point scale. It's an absolutely incredible transformation, and it happened at the exact same time as all this intense urbanization. So the government is looking at this situation, this mix of total chaos and real opportunity, and what do? Well, the state of Hidalgo decided it was time to step in and try to impose some order on the whole thing. They came up with a plan from the very top. And their solution was, a very classic government playbook. Step 1, pass a bunch of new laws to create a formal structure for everybody to work together. Step 2, officially declare these sprawling areas as metropolitan zones. And step 3, create these powerful state-run commissions to take charge of the planning and basically force these towns to coordinate. On paper, it seems perfectly logical, right? But it brings up this huge fundamental question. Can you actually command people to cooperate? Can you force teamwork from the top down? This is where the whole plan hit a major wall. And what we have here is this fundamental clash of ideas. See, most modern development theory says that real lasting progress has to grow from the bottom up. It has to be driven by the local people, the business owners, the citizens, the mayors, who actually know what their community needs. But Hidalgo's plan was the exact opposite. It was totally top-down. All the real power was concentrated in a state council run by the governor. And if you want to understand the entire problem with this approach, you just have to read this one single line from the law. It says that local experts, the business leaders, the university professors, they could be invited to the planning meetings. They were given a right to a voice, but, and this changes everything, without a vote. They were allowed to come and talk, but they had absolutely zero power to make a decision. So you've got this major disconnect. A big state plan that completely sidelines the local players. So how did this actually play out in the towns themselves? Did this mandated cooperation ever really happen? Well, when researchers went and looked at the actual city development plans, it was a really mixed bag. The capital city, Pachuca, seemed to get the memo. Its plans showed that, they understood they were part of a bigger region. But then you look at Tulancingo, another big city in the area, and the review there? Their focus on working with their neighbors was, and I'm quoting directly, practically non-existent. They were still acting like they were on an island. And it was pretty much the same story over in Tula. Their official city plans had only minimal mentions of any regional issues. So even with this big state law in place, there was almost no evidence that these towns were actually trying to work together on their own. So what's the big takeaway here? The state did its part. It created the laws, it set up the committees, it built the whole top-down structure. But what it completely failed to create was what you might call a metropolitan consciousness, that gut feeling that, hey, we're all in this together. Any real progress was happening because the state was forcing it, not because the towns were choosing to cooperate. All of this leaves us with a really big question, one that goes way beyond just Hidalgo. It's about how we're going to build our future cities, because they are getting messier, more connected, and they just don't care about the old lines we drew on a map. And that brings us to the core dilemma. Can you really build true cooperation from the top down, or does it have to grow from the ground up? The story of Hidalgo seems to point to a clear answer. You can pass all the laws you want, demanding coordination, but you can't force a change of heart. And that's the real challenge for every growing city out there. How do we build not just bigger roads and buildings, but a bigger sense of shared community to go with them?